Hello and welcome to the Buckets and Tea NBA show. I'm your host, Cathryn Naiker. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode. Joining me, pod favorite, you know her, you love her. It's Katie Heindl. How you doing, Katie?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I am good. How have you been enjoying these NBA playoffs so far?
I've been
Actually,
enjoying
before you
them.
start,
Yeah.
I forgot my water, and then I immediately started to feel parched the second we start. We're not even a
Get
full
it.
minute in.
Get it.
Love that for us. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Where's your water? Can you reach it?
No, I can't reach it. I'd
Okay.
have to physically get up.
I mean, I will say a little behind the curtain. We've been gabbing for 20 minutes before
Yeah.
we started recording, which is probably why you're parched.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Yes.
I won't drink my water in solidarity.
Oh my God, that's real friendship.
Mhm.
That is
Mhm.
real friendship.
But I've been enjoying the playoffs quite a bit. I forget. Did we talk at the beginning of the playoffs?
I think we were like end of the season you
Right.
were on. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think since then, like I've been honestly surprised at how much I've enjoyed watching the playoffs. It's really different when you don't have a rooting interest and aren't stressed out by games. And you can just, granted, like I did get stressed out in some of those like Knicks Sixers games and then Knicks Pacers for sure.
In
Yeah.
solidarity with who?
I kept changing. Like game to game, sometimes like half to half, I'd be like, no, this team wants it more now. No, this team wants it more. Just like based on antics or like what somebody was kind of getting up to. So I think that's been a very fun exercise for me, though I'm not really, it's funny because it's like, this is one of them, I think the playoff run in recent memory that I've enjoyed the most outside of when Raptors have been in it. But now it's like ground to a halt for me. The prospect of a Celtics Mavs finals is like, I don't like it. I don't care. I don't really care about it. So I guess I'm glad that I got my joy and excitement in early, because I don't know that I'll probably watch the finals, but it will be just with like, I don't like either of those teams.
Yeah, I mean, fair. I feel like as Raptors fans, there's probably a few of us that are excited for Dallas and maybe even less excited for Boston. Like I don't know any Toronto-based Boston Celtics fans. If you are one, let us know. Shout it out, and then run and hide from all the other haters. But yeah, I mean, I feel like this playoffs, I've said it before, but it's got that real NCAA kind of unpredictable energy to it, which I think is exciting as a fan. But I think a lot of these playoff series haven't been as fun to watch because of all the injuries, and we'll get into that in a later topic. But yeah, like Boston being in the finals, as easy as they got there, is not a true reflection of, well, maybe it is. I just feel like I don't know if it's a true reflection of their greatness or not. I guess time will tell. But what I want to ask you about is, there's a lot of Minnesota Timberwolves fans out there, a lot of new Timberwolves fans, I would say, who are still rooting for this team, even though as of this recording, they are down 3-1. Do you think they could achieve the impossible and actually push this to a game 7, possibly win this series? Or do you think Dallas is going to close this out?
The one thing I will say about the Celtics is I almost feel like it's like they were running in a parallel universe playoffs, and I didn't watch. Like I love the Cavs, and I can't even remember who they played in the first round.
Miami.
Well, I love Miami, but Jimmy was out. But like I feel like the Celtics and that any series they were in was like over here, and in my mind the rest of the Eastern Conference playoffs was like over here, and that was the one I enjoyed watching. And now I have to pay attention to the Celtics again. So but on the note of the Wolves, I don't think they can do it. I mean, I'm always like, why not? Sure, like any team can be eventually there will be a team that makes it back from that deficit. Like it's just going to happen in the history of the NBA, but it could be this year. It could also be like 20 years from now. Who knows? So I think, yeah, there's always a chance. I don't think it's going to happen. It took them so much to muster that win. you know?
Yeah.
And I think some of it is a big piece of it, I think, is actually mental and realizing like, oh, right, like we can beat the Mavs, but they seem to be fluctuating in and out of that mindset. And Dallas, I think, has that thing where they've just gotten better through the postseason. You know, in every series, they've like kind of fine tuned things a little bit more, and they have the thing they need where, you know, it's one guy's night, you know, night after night. The Wolves, I think, had that early on. Like Naz Reid is also obviously like a phenom now.
Yeah.
I respect people getting Naz Reid tattoos left and right in
Oh, I
Minnesota.
haven't seen that. People have
Oh,
been getting
really?
Naz Reid tattoos?
Yeah, there's like a tattooer in Minnesota who's been offering people, I think, I don't know if it's like a discount or whatever, but he's just doing like just the name Naz Reid on people. And like hundreds of people by now, I think, have gotten tattoos, Naz Reid tattoos,
Wow.
which I'm for. I love like little bits like that, you know? But no, man, it just seems like it's going to take, I think they could maybe win another one. And then I guess there's a question, well, if they get one, can they get two? And then can they get more? But it seems like a very high hill to climb, you know?
Well, yeah, and you know, I agree. I mean, I think like Dallas is obviously, it seems like they're getting better game by game since like the All-Star break up till now, and they keep impressing me. And I think on the flip side with Minnesota, I mean, Karl Anthony Towns was struggling quite a bit, and then he finally finds his shot again, and then they actually win that game. So I guess like if he can continue that trend and then not foul out, then I do think they could get another game. And, you know, it's so funny. I feel like I've been wrong about this playoffs every week on this podcast. I've just been wrong about everything. Like last week, I was like, man, there's something about Minnesota. They feel destined, you know, and then they just go on to lose over and over and over again. And it's like the second I get behind that team, they're done. So maybe Boston will end up winning because they're the only team I won't believe in throughout the entire thing. Yeah, as if I have any kind of power. But like it's just been so unpredictable and so crazy. But I feel like Minnesota could get another game. It could become a 6-game series. I don't know if it will go to 7. I don't know if they'll win. I think Dallas, if they lose in Minnesota, they'll figure out a way to close it at home in 6. I think that's what my instinct is telling me.
That feels right. You know, like the Wolves have the momentum now. They could definitely catch another one, but yeah, I think that would get quashed pretty quick. I mean, I'm with you. I feel like I've made some, I mean, I don't know that I made them on a podcast, but I definitely made some wild predictions in my mind of like, I thought like the Knicks were going to go, like make it to the, I think my very first, this was definitely just like, I was asked to contribute to like a playoff roundup thing. And it was like, give us your wildest prediction. And I was like, Cavs Wolves finals. Which now obviously I'm like, wow. You know, like you might as well have said, I don't know, the Hornets or something. Like at the beginning of the season. But like, yeah, like aside from that kind of very glaring oversight, I think every round has been a little bit surprising. I did not think the Wolves were going to beat the Nuggets.
I didn't think the Wolves were going to beat the Nuggets. I even thought Phoenix would be better than they were.
No, I don't believe in that team.
I know. Well, I didn't necessarily believe in them winning, but I didn't think they were going to get swept.
Yeah, you're just like, you guys are too technically good on paper,
like we've seen
to be this bad.
Yeah, like we've seen Durant and Booker alone score over 70 points. Like you don't think they're going to get swept, you know? But anyway, that's
poor Frank Vogel, man.
Yeah, the ultimate fall
guy's
guy.
Fault. I know.
Frank Fall Guy Vogel. I haven't seen that movie, The Fall Guy.
Neither have I.
Yeah. All right. So I don't know if that's a direct reference to the movie or not. I have no idea. Another thing I wanted to ask you about this series, and I thought this would be a fun question, especially with you to sort of dive into, because I feel like you're really good at like, you know, emotional deep dives. This is what you do. Your Miss Basketball feelings. I want to explore, why does everyone hate Rudy Gobert? This is an investigation that I feel you, Katie Heindl, are up to the task for, because it's not just fans, it's not just media, it's players as well. And it's not
Mhm.
even just Draymond Green, you know what I mean? Like, who's just been trolling him on that TNT broadcast like nonstop. But uh everyone seems to hate this guy. And I'm like, what did he do? So I sent you this article with a few things. It's like Tim McMahon
Yep.
from ESPN
Mhm.
kind of theorized a few things. I didn't even remember this fun fact, but in 2019 he cried in front of the media over being left out of the
Mhm.
All-Star game,
Mhm.
and he thinks that's where the hate for him started. Now, first of all, that's pretty funny. Like, to cry over, like, it's pretty funny to cry in front of the media over it. But to me, that's like you laugh about it in the moment and you move on. Like, to hold on to that grudge for 5 years is really intense. Of course, there was the COVID situation with him putting his hands on the microphones,
Mhm.
and then he had COVID, and everyone was really mad about that at the time, rightfully so. But I think looking back now, it's pretty easy to say that, like, the NBA shutting down was very inevitable,
Mhm.
and it is what it is. So, Katie, why does everyone hate Rudy Gobert?
It's funny because I've written about this before. I wrote like a big thing for Basketball Feelings about it once because I had the same question and was like, I don't like, I can understand it in the examples that you gave. Like, some of those are the examples I brought up as well. The COVID one now, it's just like, and in the article that you sent, like Tim McMahon says the same thing I did, of just like, just the worst possible timing
Mm,
imaginable. Now, kind of funny, frankly, and like the way that he sort of frames the joke of just like that's sort of his sense of humor. Like, he's
mm,
trying to say like, yeah, like, I'm not scared of you guys, I'm like, I don't know that it was like that human. That's a little bit of like retrospect, of being like, I'm how like what am I trying to say? Everyone got so freaked out, obviously, in COVID. And it was a situation where you're walking on like different sides of the street from like your neighbors and stuff. So I think a little bit of that is projecting what happened. Like, Rudy Gobert couldn't have known how divisive things would get.
mhm,
Anyway, I did know about the crying thing. I think he's cried another time too. He's also, I think he cried on the phone with his mom once. So what I eventually landed on was just like, this guy is so kind of emotionally open sometimes, and also so kind of candid and visible in his disappointments. Like, he really wants the things he wants, and when they don't happen, he gets upset. And I think there's a degree of how uncomfortable that makes people, because everyone can relate. Like, it shouldn't, because everyone can relate to that. But there's something about seeing those very vulnerable feelings mirrored in somebody like an athlete, I think, where
mhm,
we also project onto them heavily all the time. This thing where like we don't want them to emote, and if we do, it's in very specific ways. Like, they can be celebratory, but it has to be within the bounds of, I think, still like very masculine, sort of machismo, even everything from like, the celebratory gestures that somebody does on the floor. If they want something really badly, they like get to say it a few times, but if they don't get it, it's like they can maybe be like, yeah, that's too bad, but they can't dwell on things. They basically just like cannot run the full range of their human spectrum of emotions in public, right? Like, they can do it in private, sure, but like, we don't want to see it, because I think it destabilizes this idea of what an athlete's supposed to be. It's certainly like a super antiquated idea, but I do think that's still there, whether
mhm,
that's like in the discourse or just, what we kind of, again, like project onto athletes. And I think Rudy Gobert upends that, because he's just so frank about the things that he wants.
mhm.
I also think there's a degree of otherness there, especially now. I don't really understand why um, so many people, Americans, especially American broadcasters in the NBA or players turned broadcasters, hate European players. Like,
Yeah, that's a whole thing too.
and
It
it's
is.
like he's quite French, like in the way that he, like he is very emotional. But I think there's like, I don't understand why. It's like people hate Jokic for the same reason, but like Jokic is the opposite of Gobert. Like he doesn't emote.
Yeah, like he doesn't give a shit.
And like people actually don't like that because then with Jokic, who's kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, it's like, no, we want you to emote more. But even that would be like up to a certain degree. If he went full Gobert,
Right.
people wouldn't like praise him for it. They'd be like, this guy's lost it. So I think,
Well, yeah. And they also come from very different cultures. Like they're
of
not,
course,
you know.
yeah.
So I want to ask you something. So he cried on the phone with his mom.
I think so, and I think his
But
mom
was that
also
was that
once.
public? Like how do we know that? Like where was that?
I'm trying to remember where it was, or if it was like he came out after and said something, or I think like maybe his mom might have commented like she thought people were being hard on him.
Oh, okay.
Or that he even just said, yeah, I was really disappointed and I cried and I called my mom.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because I was like, wait, is there like video of this guy crying on the
Like I
phone
wouldn't
to
be
his mom?
surprised, but like I can't. I mean, I know
Oh.
it for a reason. Like I wasn't in the room when that happened, but I do recall that
Yeah,
was a
but
thing that happened.
everyone should be allowed to cry on the phone to their mom.
Yeah, like again,
That should be
a
safe
very human
thing.
impulse, but there's this sense I think of no, these things have to happen in public. There's a framework for how these things have to happen, and if you kind of deviate from that, then I think you are a little bit targeted. Like we've seen it with a lot of players who like emote or like choose to emote in a different way. And I think that's where some of his being ostracized comes from his peers. Granted, I also just think for a long time we heard that Rudy Gobert could be kind of annoying. Like I think
Right.
that's where the like fracture between him and Donovan Mitchell came from. And I like in the way that in that article that Tim McMahon said, like, yeah, Kat and Anthony Edwards, like, and Rudy Gobert, like they did not like like the whole time. Like I guess like his whole first season, like they didn't like him. And then something happened where they were like, okay, this guy's kind of goofy. And now we kind of get along. So I feel like we also, if he is all those things and then has like a very grating sense of humor and personality, which like everybody knows people like that, or everyone has encountered someone like that who just immediately rubs you the wrong way, then he's got a few different things kind of working against him. But like in a very philosophical way, like very high level, I wondered if Rudy Gobert, people really don't like Rudy Gobert because he mirrors back to us the things we're most uncomfortable with in ourselves, frankly.
Right. Well, especially like you said, like the whole like machismo thing, right?
Mhm.
Like, because there are a lot of emotional guys in the NBA, but they're emotional in this like, I don't know. I almost said status quo way, but I don't even know if that's the right phrasing.
I think that's correct though.
Yeah, like you know what I mean, like a Draymond
Yeah.
Green, right? Or like a Patrick Beverly. Like that's like, you're kind of taught to be like, oh, that's what being emotional as a guy, as an athlete is.
And those guys, you'd be like, they're passionate. But like when Rudy Gobert, I mean, when Draymond Green is like dragging Rudy Gobert across the floor in a chokehold, like that's not passionate to me. That's a problem.
It could be a passionate problem.
It's a passionate problem. But like for so long, that was, I think up until this year when Draymond really overstepped the lines multiple times and did it so rapidly, that changed a little bit. But I think up until if he hadn't done that, I still think that's something that could have been framed like he's just such a passionate player and like he gets passionate for us and like we need him to be like that. Like that's the other thing you'll hear, right?
The Warriors always say that.
Yes,
we need him to be like that. And it's like,
I mean, behind closed doors, they are certainly being like, you got to tone it down, dude. But out in front, they're like, no, that's who he is, and we absolutely like applaud him for being that way.
Yeah, I do feel like we've solved this mystery very well. Thank you so much, Detective Katie Heindl. No, it's just so weird to me because I mean, I don't know about the grading personality issue that I can definitely understand, but even the emotional stuff wouldn't like again, like, wouldn't you just like laugh that off and let it go? Like that, like to hold a grudge against that to me is just wild, especially like, considering there's like men in the NBA who've done awful things, as we know, and they're just like, yeah, well, he's a great player. And you're just like, okay,
How could I
who,
possibly judge him and the things he does? Yeah, off the floor.
yeah, and it's like, okay, the things we care about,
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing I want to ask you about, Katie, is all these insane injuries that have happened throughout these playoffs. And, there are people talking about, did the 65 game rule this year, for anyone who doesn't know, there was a 65 game rule that you had to play a minimum of 65 games in order to qualify for the NBA awards, like all NBA,
Mhm.
defensive player, MVP, et cetera, et cetera. Um, do you feel like that 65 game rule impacted players to push themselves maybe more than they would have, and therefore we have so many injuries throughout this year's playoffs?
Not really. I don't like there's an interesting dip. There is an interesting dip, I think, in the data of like when guys started to rest, and it was almost like when they hit that 65 game quota, and a lot of that was like post All-Star, I believe, they were resting more, and then they were ramping up, maybe 2-3 weeks after that. Actually, probably maybe a month after that for the postseason, right? And I've written about this before. Like I would say I have the most like investigative, I shouldn't do air quotes. It was an investigative story, but I'm like, sure. But I did write, I've written a few stories, one was about load management, and it was talking to sports scientists and a lot of people who study this and that they spend their whole career studying this. And I did another one whether there had been like an uptick in injuries after the NBA's bubble season, when the scheduling was kind of out of whack and when guys did not have access to the same training equipment that they would have had in what they call like the ramp up time. And like the ramp up time, from everything I've learned from the experts, is the most important time. And it's not so much that the more games guys play, the more they get hurt. There are certainly more opportunities to get hurt, but it's not that there's something in their bodies that is more fatigued. What actually happens is when there are these gaps where they kind of stop playing either cold or are playing in a diminished way and then have to quickly get back to what they were used to, that's where they're most susceptible to injury. I mean, this was just kind of looking at the story you sent and like tracing and thinking for a second, like, oh, right, these guys would have stopped and been resting because they could have been rests. That kind of pressure was off. They hit the quota for 65 games or whatever. That would have been the time. And then, if they're like, okay, we made the playoffs, we're going to need you back because you're going to be playing like upwards of 40 minutes a night. That's when they would kind of be setting themselves up, honestly, I think, for like a greater risk of injury. And not from what I said before, not from like that actually would be something internal, rather. Like that would be their bodies were not in the shape and condition they needed to be, So there could be something there, but granted, like the opinions on this change all the time. Like when Silver and the NBA came out this year and was like, there's no evidence. It's like, sure, but like in a way, there's no evidence either way. Like you could make an argument for load management, you could make one against it. It would be the same every season, and it really just comes down to these like specific conditions. But the basis of it is it's very expensive to test. Like you'd have to test so many NBA players all throughout a season, and the way that they have to test them is like they have to take time off to test. So this is another thing experts told me, is like there's never really been like a pure like scientific test of basketball players at a high level because of the way that their schedules are, because they have to play so many games. They can't then go to a testing facility,
Right.
It's just like their schedule doesn't allow for it. So a lot of the data is also has huge gaps in it. I wouldn't say it's incorrect. It's just like they don't have it a lot of the time on that side of things. So I don't think the 65 game rule is contributing in the way that it's like being set up to say that it is. I think it's probably just in that these guys got it to 65 games, they took a break, and then because they weren't used to taking a break and had to get into like playoff shape very quickly, that's perhaps where some things got exacerbated.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like based on everything you're saying, which was really well put, that I actually do think it is affecting these guys. Like you said, not in the way that people might think, but it is still affecting them. And then, of course, like, I don't think Embiid has ever admitted it out loud, but that, like, he had these like chronic injuries and then it turned into a meniscus. And then there was all this pressure to get him healthy for the playoffs. And you could tell he just was not fully there. And I don't know. Like, I do think, maybe these guys won't say it out loud, but I do think it was on their mind. And it's not just about the awards themselves, it's also about the money. Right? Like these
No, of
guys get
course.
huge financial incentives for being all NBA and stuff like that. And I kind of feel like maybe that shouldn't be a part of the equation with these awards. Like I actually think they need to separate the money and the bonuses from that because it's voted by the media and it's very arbitrary. And
I don't know if you can hear that. It's like
I
the
can.
longest air breaks in history. It's stopped now.
It sounded like a child on like the squeakiest tricycle. Just like, I don't know.
Just the slowest braking truck of all time. Sorry about that.
All good. All good. But yeah, I do think that they were impacted by it. I don't think they'll say it, but I do think that like that it was in the back of their minds and maybe they did push themselves more than they should. I mean, I feel like I don't know. I think Adam Silver said all of that because he's a businessman.
Yes.
And he cares about money, and every decision he's made has been about money. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but it's like that's the clear motivation for him.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like maybe it's, that goes back to the argument about like not having an 82 game season. It should be less. Like one thing I've been thinking about, Katie, I'm just kind of randomly throwing this in there, is what if they just like canceled preseason and then extended the 82 game season? Because every team's figuring it out in the beginning of the season anyway. You can still do that in-season tournament in like November leading up to like Christmas or whatever. And then you can space the games out more and then you don't have any back-to-backs.
No, I think that's smart because I would say like the preseason, if the preseason could count towards the regular season, which is what I think you're saying, because the preseason is kind of crucial in the sense that those games are not going to be as competitive and they are part of that ramping up process I was talking about. Because like, yeah, these guys have been in their training camps, but like those scrimmages are much different than like, like a full time NBA game. And just like the moves and the time that they'll be playing and the conditioning and all of that, like it changes. So maybe have like one pregame game, and then that's great for your markets too.
Yeah.
And then start the season. No, I think that's like that certainly would be a good way of like, you don't have to shorten the season, which a lot of people are calling for. I also like, I don't think it's the worst idea. But then you don't have to do it. I think you're totally spot on with most of what Adam Silver says. He's saying it because there's either like a contract to be negotiated on the horizon, which is, I think, what he was alluding to when he said that, because it's like they have to renegotiate all their broadcast deals. And like no broadcaster, if Adam Silver was like, oh yeah, there is like a lot of proof behind load management, some broadcasters, as callous as they can be, might be like, oh, does that mean we're not going to see stars like every night?
Yeah.
Whatever, right? So like, I think that's a little bit of a wink and a nod to broadcasters on Adam Silver's part, which he's always very aware of the optics, of everything going on. But yeah, I think that would be like a fine and like a pretty smart way to you're not adding games, you're not taking games away, but you're just starting things you're starting them to count a little bit earlier, because that in-season tournament as much as it was fun, like it's not going anywhere. You know,
I still can't get over that stupid banner. The banner,
Lakers.
the
I mean, the Lakers need it.
champagne.
The Lakers like need everything they can get right now.
So
Clearly,
cringe.
no, it is cringe
to spray champagne on each other in December.
Save it for New Year's, guys.
At least make it Prosecco. I mean, at least. But I mean, oh, the banner, the ring. Like,
I've honestly forgot about the banner.
Get out of here. So put it in a community center. Like, oh my God. Anyway, that whole thing drives me crazy. Okay, Katie, looking ahead to the offseason, tons of rumors already swirling, right? Paul George going to the 76ers. Trae Young's going to get traded. Oh my God. What is like the one offseason prediction you think is actually going to be true? Or more than one?
I don't know that Paul George is going anywhere. Trae Young, I feel that he will probably get traded. They got to move off somebody, and it hasn't been working with him. I think the funniest like rumors, again, this is from the list that you sent, but so many of them were just like, this team is going to keep their pick. It's like, okay.
No, yeah, I know.
This is so boring.
They tried so hard to get to 10.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
like,
number 4, Jazz will keep number 10 pick. And it's like, that is not, no one cares.
The Spurs are going to take their time. Like, is that a rumor? Like, that's the way they do things. That's their organizational, like,
yeah.
Like, the biggest quality of that team.
Yeah.
I don't know. I heard something that it was like this offseason is going to have way more moves than we ever expected. But like, I'm starting to think, you know, that can be true of every offseason. There are a million things that happen and that you forget about. I think like I think DeMar and the Bulls is probably a fair and sad thing that's going to happen. Though the idea of him going to the Clippers team and the rest of that Clippers roster staying intact somehow, I'm just like, sign me up for the retiree NBA team. I love the Clippers. I'd love it's just a collection of like
how would they fit DeMar into that equation? Like
prime. Would we be looking at like a DeMar Russ off the bench lineup?
No, DeMar can't come off the bench.
He might.
He's still too strong of an offensive player.
Maybe, but I would say that the Clippers could use somebody like that coming off the bench. So
but they have Norm Powell.
They do have Norm Powell. Though to a degree, I think Norm should probably be starting at this point. Given the like veracity of the Clippers are like, they're an older team, man. I love them, but
yeah, I mean, I think I might go a step further. I think the Bulls are going to blow it up. Like, yeah. I don't think the Bulls are going to realistically return with this team. I think, you know, there's rumors that they tried to trade Zach LaVine at the trade deadline, but then he was injured, and then that, like, you know, that kind of, you know, squashed that. But maybe in this offseason, he could be traded. I think the Bulls are definitely gonna rebuild. That would be my sort of bold offseason prediction. I cannot see DeMar DeRozan as a Clipper.
No, there's like an appeal.
They would have
to
move
home. I think
have to move off of someone else,
not Russ.
Not or maybe, but like maybe like if Harden moves, or if Paul George leaves, then they quickly try to offer DeMar a deal. But like, I just don't see him fitting in with that team as it is. It's too many ball heavy players, right? Like it would just be like every play a new player in an ISO situation.
The Paul George thing is weird to me because it's like he started that iteration of the Clippers. He was like, you know what I mean? No, actually, I guess Kawhi did. But then Kawhi's like, I need to play with my best friend, Paul George.
Right.
So like,
and then Paul George has a whole podcast to be like, yeah, see, he is funny. He is a cool guy.
I mean, it is a good podcast.
Yeah.
But like One, no further evidence that those two are even friends or know each other, frankly, as more than colleagues.
Maybe to Kawhi that is friendship.
That's true. Oh, yeah, that's true. I don't know. I'm kind of like, how crazy could this offseason be? Like, yes, there were teams that got shook up in the playoffs, but like none of the things that happened, I think, were that surprising. You know what I mean? Like the shortcomings we could see, it was just a question of how exacerbated were they going to get. The coaching changes, I think, are the biggest things. And like those seem to already be like sites. Sorry, my cat's auto feeder is going. I don't know if you can hear it.
You muted yourself, but you were mid-sentence.
I realized what I was doing. I was like, you can't do that. The coaching changes are like the biggest thing, but like most of those have already happened, right? Or are rumored to be pretty much like completed.
JJ Redick.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. Like, what could be the wildest thing? A Bulls rebuild is more
Not
sad
that
to me
wild.
than crazy. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I mean, I think Paul George leaving would be pretty wild, but I don't think it would happen. I don't think Klay Thompson's gonna leave. Like, I actually think, like, I don't know if Trae Young is gonna get traded from the Hawks. I feel like a lot of that talk is coming from other teams wanting to put Trae Young next to their player and other media markets being excited by the prospect of Trae Young moving. I feel like even though like it hasn't worked out since they made that Eastern Conference Finals run, my impression, and I could be wrong, but my impression is that the Atlanta Hawk fan base still loves Trae Young. And I think
yeah, sorry.
no. This is just my theory. I think like that maybe trading DeJounte Murray to, I don't know for who, but to keep Trae Young and then to try and pair him with someone else and to try and build a sort of nucleus is more the direction I see them going in. I don't know if that's going to work out. Like, I'm not claiming that's going to work out, but I just don't think the Hawks are going to give up on Trae Young that easily.
I think they're a very stubborn franchise, especially when you look at like they obviously know the comparisons, and it's impossible for them to forget because it gets brought up like all the time, especially in the postseason. But it's like, you guys could have had Luka and you picked Trae. I think Trae. I actually think Trae Young leaving Atlanta would probably be good for Trae Young too. I think there comes a point when it's just very clear that there's a disconnect or a mismatch, or like a player has outgrown a team or vice versa. And I think that's what's happening there. I think there's a certain stubbornness of being like, we don't want to give up on this guy who we picked. And we've brought now in several coaches to try and figure out like how to get the best of him and coach the most out of him. We've kind of changed the roster around him, though we've really dragged our heels on that. Like, feel bad again for John Collins just getting put through the trade rumors for so long until they actually pulled the trigger on it.
That was crazy.
Yeah, but like, and now I think the same thing is happening to DeJounte Murray. So, I mean, we'll see. I think they should move. I think there should be like an amicable divorce there between the two of them.
Well, maybe that will happen. Maybe it will be an amicable divorce, but I don't know if they're all, internally getting along, which it's hard for us to say. Then I don't see them being like, oh, everyone here still, everyone's still buying Trae Young jerseys, but we're just going to trade him anyways. You know what I mean?
The Hawks are a tough team for me because I don't think I can't think of a team I feel as ambivalent about, in that I forget about them all the time. And I love Quinn Snider, but like I forget about the Hawks and have like really no competitive opinion about them.
Controversial opinion about Quinn Snider.
Don't say something you might regret. To me,
I could do without the red glasses. That's my controversial opinion. I like to think of myself as an authority on glasses.
Yeah, that's true.
I think
good glasses.
I think he should, if he wants red, I think he should go with a darker red. Like, you know what I mean? Like almost like not maroon, but like almost maroon.
Okay.
Or he should do something else. but the bright red, I feel, detracts from his face.
What about like an acetate frame in like a different shape? What if he did like a circle, like a bold?
No, I don't know if that would suit his face.
I think it could in a crazy
Maybe like a
way.
more aviator style.
Oh,
That
maybe.
type of circle, but not like fully round.
Right. I mean, you'll never convince me. I love those glasses.
That's
and
fair. I did
Batman.
preface that this was a controversial opinion.
I didn't go to the Hawks game, and while I do regret
And
it, when
I
the
hope
Hawks
it
were
doesn't hurt our
in town,
friendship.
it won't. It won't. But a part of me was like, as sad as I was to miss that game, I was also kind of relieved because I was like in my head, I'm like, Katie, like, I don't know what you would have done, like 3 feet away from this man.
Well, I want to know. I want you in a room with Quinn Snider now.
Well, what is it? Wow, I can't believe I'm blanking on the word.
It's because you're thinking about those
I'm
red
thinking about
glasses.
and Quinn Snider. When you project something, visualization. Wow. Let's visualize it and make it happen.
I feel like you could, like when he's in Toronto, you could go.
Yeah.
You could get a media pass for the next Hawks Raptors game.
That's when I missed it the last time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant you were in Atlanta for a second. My bad.
No, I was in Toronto. I have my season credential, but I wasn't like able to go to that game. And it was like it was like heartbreak, but also like secret relief.
No, you got to go.
I don't want to get arrested.
As a former coach lover myself, you need to go.
Okay.
So the thing is like, you know, I've moved on to Klay Thompson. Everyone who listens to this podcast knows that. I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I would say if I ever met Klay Thompson.
I interviewed Klay Thompson for my book this season. He was one of the last people I talked to this season.
Katie!
I can't believe I didn't tell you. One, I don't think I knew you moved on to Klay, but like good choice.
I probably didn't tell you I moved on to Klay.
Okay.
Tell me everything.
Klay
Forget
Thompson?
Every topic I sent you.
Klay Thompson is like a joy to talk to. Like he's one of which is why I wanted to talk to him. And what I wanted to talk to him was a lot about like being vulnerable and like the words we kind of assign to play, you know, being so hard and like grading, kind of what we were talking about earlier, you know. And I wanted to talk to him about honestly pleasure and like how pleasurable it must feel sometimes to just be able to do the things that someone like him is able to do, you know. And like we really can overcomplicate it, but something I was curious about, and I've talked to a few players about this, but just like, are you ever just like, this feels really good to be able to do, you know what I mean? Like you must take some pleasure in the things that your body can do, that you've conditioned it to this point where like you're able to, you know, kind of control it and the game, and like almost sometimes it seems like time in that way. And like Klay is, you know, one of those guys where he's great to talk to because you actually never know what he's gonna say. Mm-hmm. You know, and Klay, that's why I wanted to talk to him about that. And because I think he's like very candid about,
he's very genuine, yeah,
his feelings. And I think he's one of the only players I've ever talked to who like he'll like change his mind throughout what he's saying, and he's not self-conscious about that. You know, he'll be like, oh, it's kind of like this. He'll be like, you know what? No, it's not like that. It's actually like this. And I really like that because you can see him processing the thing that you're saying. The first thing he said to me when I told him I wanted to talk to him for the book was, wow, an author. He was like, not just any other blogger. And I was like, no, I do those too. He's like, oh, you do everything. I'm like, yep, sure. Thank you, Klay Thompson. But yeah, he told me it's one of the best feelings in the world. It feels incredibly good. You know, we got more granular about the specifics of it, but he was talking about kind of like being in a free state and the things that he went through after his injury, and honestly being scared that he would not feel how good it felt to move that way again, which was sort of heartbreaking because it's something I think, again, like we think like, oh, it's going to suck if these guys' careers are over for like these more, I don't know, like callous reasons or like financial reasons or their legacy, etc. But like we don't think how it might feel to just lose something that feels so good to do. that you love and are really good at, and it can sometimes be as simple as that. So Klay was great. I think Chris Paul was getting like a massage treatment right behind us. Klay was like, then I went back after the game to talk to him. He was like in his underwear. He's like, "Can I get dressed?" I'm like, "Yeah, for sure. Don't worry. I'll wait over here."
He was in his underwear.
Yeah, it happens, Cathryn. And you just politely look in this space. You keep your eyes up.
That, I mean, good for you.
Like Klay is just like, I was certainly nervous. He's one of those people to talk to where this doesn't happen to me often, but like the reality of the person kind of aligns with your, whether it's like fandom or just like a bit starstruckness of their personality. It hits you sometimes. And I think that like those are the moments where in your head you blank a little bit and you're like, oh, I'm talking to this person. And then you have to quickly bring yourself back.
Wow. This is why you're the journalist. and you know what, Katie, like, I think, I'm not just saying this to butter you up for no reason, but like you're the one person who asks those questions. You know what I mean? Like, really, like that is in part what makes you special, because you are like, I want to know how they feel just about playing basketball. And for all the media that exists and for all the questions these guys get, they don't get that question. And I think that's really cool.
Thanks, Cathryn.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, I think it's cool when someone like Klay, and this is like another kudos to Klay thing, understands like the vulnerabilities kind of inherent in a question like that, and still decides to answer truthfully, and like kind of like silly but serious, really sincere. Like that's a really rare thing, because, and I will totally acknowledge you. It's one thing to ask those questions in the relative privacy of a locker room where guys are like with their teammates and friends versus like on a podium, So I think the setting does like certainly change it. But anyway, thank you.
You're welcome. You interviewed Klay Thompson in his underwear.
I mean, he did put clothes on.
Yeah, but eventually, all right. I'll ask you about that more offline. Okay. Yeah. We're just like having a hard time transitioning here. That's all my fault. That's absolutely my fault. Okay. Katie, it's Hottie Highlight of the Week time. I guess
I feel like I just gave you the Hottie Highlight, but
that's the Hottie Highlight of the year. Forget the week. But okay. So, we're giving everyone a choice now. We're giving the guest a choice, which you've done. And your choices this week, I had to search. I didn't even realize this happened because I'm not on TikTok. But Scottie Barnes linked up with a popular TikToker who is a tailor based in Hong Kong. His name is Roshan Mawani. And he works at Sam's Tailors in Hong Kong. And I guess he's known for being, quote, handsy with his clients. And he said, quote, in relation to Scottie Barnes, quote, he doesn't realize the nightmare he's just walked into while in the process of being measured for tailored clothes. So this is option one.
Okay.
Option two is former Raptor Pascal Siakam talking about the, quote, breakup that he went through leaving Toronto, referring to leaving Toronto as a breakup, and that it was really hard on him. And if it wasn't for Indiana being so supportive when he came, he's actually unsure how he would have handled it or what he would have done, which is like, very opposite to the silly Scottie Barnes scenario, but it's more emotional. It's more, tied to his time as a Raptor. Katie, what say you?
This is tough because you'd think I would pick Pascal because of this like vulnerability, And it is very vulnerable, I think, for him to say that. And I am proud of him to be at a point where he can like talk about it. I'm proud of him. I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean
No,
that
not at
like,
all.
yeah, like it must feel good to be at a place where you can talk about something like that and call it what you felt like it was at the time, right? To name it. But I'm gonna pick Scottie Barnes because I don't have TikTok either, but I saw on an Instagram story, like I guess a week ago, he was going to Hong Kong, and I love Hong Kong. I was like, oh, that's sick. He's gonna have a great time. I feel like he's gonna love it, but I didn't know what he was doing there. Unfamiliar with this like handsy TikTok Taylor, but
The handsy TikTok Taylor.
he should change his handle.
Uh-huh.
But that sounds fun and cool that he's I hope he didn't just go to Hong Kong to see a guy from TikTok, though I feel like that's where we're headed to in terms of like what dictates our whims of travel. But I like that more. I don't know. It's also in line with the way that we've been oogling people on this podcast for the last 20 minutes. So I feel like it fits in with the theme.
Look, in all fairness to me, I have one hottie highlight at the end of every episode, and I did not know that I was embarking a story about you interviewing Klay Thompson in his underwear. Okay, like I didn't know.
And then Quinn Snider before that, to be
and
fair.
then Quinn Snider before that. I just, we just ended up there.
We didn't know.
We didn't know. We just spontaneously ended up in a
It's
place.
summer,
It's summer. Yeah.
You should tell your listeners, match our freak. Step up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Actually, that should be the post. Match our freak.
Match our freak.
I can't wait to see the comment section on that. Yeah, Scottie's a great choice. I'm sure he's doing other things in Hong Kong. I'm curious to see what his fits will be next season now.
Me
now
too.
that we know that he's spending his off season to get tailored outfits by famous. I didn't even know there were famous tailors.
What does this guy do? He just gropes people? He gets close to the tape?
I guess because he's been referred to as handsy. And I can only assume a handsy tailor means one thing.
Like they're taking a really close measurement in a certain.
Yeah, that's what I would assume. That's what it's implying.
Okay.
Someone can let us know how handsy this tailor.
I'd say really like most tailors, when I've ever had clothes altered or like, seamstresses and tailors, they got to get in there. I mean, they don't go,
Yeah.
They're very professional about it. It's a different touch. It's like a doctor's touch. It's a bit surgical.
It's very doctory.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Like
so whether this guy's caressing, maybe.
Yeah, like if I'm getting like measured for a bra or something, it's very doctor-like. Yeah.
A bra fitting?
Yeah.
I'm sure half of your listeners can't relate, but that's a different. You just forget that what you're doing. You just forget that you're just there and open.
Shout out to all the listeners who can relate to a bra fitting, though.
Yes, absolutely.
Life-changing
experience.
Raptors Republic,
go and do it.
Raptors Republic, very male audience, but I feel like the women are here with me. I feel that
if you've never done one and you're on the fence, you got to do it. It will change your life and the experience. If you feel nervous, don't be. They're professionals. They are some of the most. You know what I mean?
I am laughing at the way you said professional.
They're pros.
They are professionals. Like it was
I mean, kudos to them. I'm remembering in a flash, like all these, in like a montage, all the great bra fitting experiences. Can't beat that feeling. You feel confident, well fitted. Everything's where it should be. Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. We should end it
match
there.
Your freak. Bra fitters do.
They match your freak. There we go. That's going to be the clip this week. No, I'm kidding. It won't be. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening. Appreciate you all so much. If you haven't yet, subscribe, like if there's an option to like, and all that good stuff. I'm trying to get better at saying those things. We're gonna get better at it. It's a whole thing. Katie, thank you so much for joining me. Let us know what you're up to and where we can find you on the internets.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at whatevs, WTEVS. You can also go to basketballfeelings.com. You can subscribe. I have a podcast there as well. I have my annual playoff series called Exits, which gives every NBA team as they are eliminated a little bit of runway. I have a lot of great guests this year writing, so I don't have to write every team's, which is great. I also have a WNBA column at The Believer magazine. The third installment will be coming out this Friday. It's about Candace Parker. If you want to talk about professionals, absolutely a professional and a phenom. You can read that at, I should really learn what I think it's just Believer. It might just be believer.com, thebeliever.com. So
I guess if you Google like WNBA Believer, people will find it.
You'll find it right away. Yes. Yes. Oh, and I will plug, they're unfortunately eliminated, but I wrote a profile about TJ McConnell for SB. It's quite a long story. I talked to so many people about him. Jimmy Butler was one of them. I have not heard grown men gush the way they do about TJ McConnell. I was having to like get off the phone with these guys because they were not letting me go. They just want to talk about how great he is. And I talked to TJ too. So you can find that at SB Nation.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone. And we'll catch you next time. Bye.